I'm Roy Speckhart, Executive Director of the American Humanist Association. In my many years of service to the humanist movement, this is the first time I've had the honor to personally introduce the Humanist of the Year, and I couldn't be more pleased to do so. Since meeting Representative Jared Huffman back in September of 2017, I was immediately struck by his open approach, his genuine commitment to humanity and the environment, and his deep respect for people from every kind of background and belief. His subsequent going public as a humanist and an agnostic made news across the nation because he was only the second member of Congress in history to take such a bold step. In the months that followed, Center for Free Thought Equality's Ron Millar and I met with him and several members of Congress as the Congressional Free Thought Caucus was birthed. The CFC continues to grow, promoting sound public policy based on reason, science, and moral values, while promoting the secular character of government and demonstrating the value of freedom of thought worldwide. Representing California's 2nd District, which follows the coast north of San Francisco, he was first elected back in November of 2012 and currently serves on the Committee on Natural Resources, the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, the Select Committee on Climate Crisis, and in the 116th Congress chairs the Natural Resources Subcommittee on Water, Oceans, and Wildlife, with jurisdiction over federal water projects, fisheries management, coastal and oceans policy, as well as wildlife and endangered species. Congressional Huffman is a true champion for humanist principles. During his 4 terms in Congress, he built a reputation as a progressive leader and environmental expert who focuses on making a difference. As founder and current co-chair of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, Representative Huffman forged a coalition of more than a dozen members of Congress working together to defend the rights of humanists, freethinkers, and other non-theists. Under his leadership, the caucus has been an important voice for a wide range of issues, including opposing the nomination of Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, speaking out against the creation of the poorly named Religious Liberty Task Force, and supporting legislation such as the No Ban Act, which recently passed the House. Representative Huffman continues to be an instrumental person in defending Americans' coastlines from offshore oil and gas drilling, introducing legislation to protect the Pacific and Arctic oceans as part of a coordinated nationwide effort to protect ecosystems and coastal economies while reducing our unhealthy dependency on fossil fuels. Before serving in Congress, Representative Huffman served in the California Assembly, and before that, worked as an attorney for the Natural Resources Defense Council with legal victories, including positive verdicts in gender and in race discrimination trials. So, with such a stellar record, I'm sure you can see why it is my distinct pleasure to present to Jared Huffman the 2020 Humanist of the Year Award for his powerful progressive advancements for our country and for our planet, and for his outstanding humanistic leadership. The floor is yours, Congressman.
Well, Roy, thank you so much. I am humbled and not worthy, especially when I think about the amazing people that have received this award in years past. I mean, incredible scientists and writers like one of my favorite writers, Kurt Vonnegut. This is rarefied air, and I clearly don't belong in that strata. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I will try to live up to the incredible honor that you have just bestowed upon me. And I will accept it on behalf of all the good non-theists everywhere. And of course, a lot of closeted non-theists in the United States Congress, probably a lot of non-theists around the country that are thinking about whether they can step into the arena of public service. I guess if I add anything to this conversation, it's that you really can. And so it's in that spirit and with an awful lot of gratitude and humility that I'll accept this award and thank you and the Humanist Association for being such great partners and for really helping set me on this interesting path of being the only openly non-theist member of the United States Congress.
Wonderful. For many atheists and agnostics, we find it empowering to hear others' stories about how they moved away from their belief systems of their early years to embrace a more humanistic way of thinking. Like myself, I understand that you began to move away from organized religion in your early 20s. Can you tell us a little bit about your thought process during that time?
Yeah, it was obviously a time when I was figuring out who I was as an adult. And there was some pain involved. I lost my father, and for a variety of reasons, as I started to get a university education, a liberal education, think a little more critically, the answers that I had come to accept from my religious upbringing just didn't work for me anymore. So I'd like to think that some of the good aspects of the moral framework that I got from my religious upbringing are still with me, but the dogma is not. And over the course of a few years, I just broke. And the thing I suspect many humanists and other non-theists have had this experience if they grew up in religion. You do feel a sense of loss when that
Mm.
happens. And I really want to thank you and the Humanist Association. Roy, you gave me a book on humanism. And for many years, I didn't really know what label I could embrace. And if there was a community of fellow travelers that might see things the way I did, and you helped me realize that the humanism really is that for me. So that's why I felt comfortable coming out and embracing humanism, and I wouldn't have done that if it hadn't been for you.
Oh, well, I'm very humbled by that. Thank you for saying so. Um, how have things changed for you, if at all, in the 3 years since you first identified publicly as a humanist and an agnostic?
Well, a lot has changed, but the thing that everybody thought would change, and I should rewind a little bit, when I began to think about publicly doing this, everyone that I talked to, all the advisors I trust, my close family members and friends, to a person thought it was a terrible idea. So nobody could really see any upside to it. And a lot of my friends and advisors, for really good reasons, benevolent reasons, they had my interest at heart,
Uh-huh.
warned me not to do it. They thought it would hurt my political future. And I went against all of that advice because it just felt like the right thing to do. And sometimes you need to do that. I'm so glad I did, because I personally feel like a weight has lifted. I'm just being honest about who I am. But you know what? The surprise is there's a little bit of a political upside to it,
Really?
especially in a district like mine. There are just an awful lot of people who see the world the same way, and they appreciate the honesty. And even people of faith, who are kind of tired of this drag to theocracy and the other challenges we're grappling with, appreciated what I did and how I did it. So it's been a net positive.
Great. Um, well, as a humanist, can you share a few guiding moral principles that are meaningful to you?
Well, I think the moral framework of humanism just really works right down the line for me. I
Mm.
love the focus on facts and science and reality. I love the focus on goodness as just a human quality that we owe to each other and future generations, rather than as some sort of a thing we need to do to gain entry to the afterlife. So humanism is just a beautiful expression of the best of humanity as I see it. And if everybody followed those principles, I think we'd be a lot better off. I think we'd have far less conflict. I think we'd solve problems better. We probably wouldn't be in a number of these overlapping crises that we're dealing with today, because we would listen to facts and to science, and we would make decisions based on that rather than wishful notions, including religion.
Yeah. To follow up a little on that, maybe to get a little further into it, does your humanism help you make informed choices about public policy matters?
I'm sure that it does, but probably not as such. I don't step back and think now, how does this fit in my humanist filter? The humanist filter was already there, because as I read your book, as I came to appreciate the way humanism is articulated, it was all the stuff I already believed and I already thought. You just did a real beautiful job of articulating it and expressing it. And I'm so glad that so many other people, other humanists, identify with that articulation of principles and values, because I do think it's the best of humanity.
Wonderful, wonderful. You're a champion of environmental justice and addressing climate crisis. What drivers in your life brought you to make these issues such a priority?
I've always cared a lot about, so let's start with the environmental justice. I've always cared a lot about civil rights.
Mm,
Growing up as a young kid in the Midwest, and this was not something that my parents instilled in me. Maybe my older sister, my 14-year older sister, who was marching and protesting in the heyday of civil rights and anti-war movements, helped. But for some reason, as a kid, and really of my own inspiration, I had a picture of JFK, RFK, and Martin Luther King on my wall. Growing up in the late '60s and early '70s, and you know, those were my icons. And I think I've always felt a great deal of shame and guilt and confusion about racism and its central role in the founding and the history of this country. And I have felt that for as long as I can remember, even though I got one of those airbrushed versions of history growing up. You know, I didn't even have the full story
right.
of just how deeply embedded racism and all of this systemic bad stuff was in our country's founding and continuing for a long, long time. So
Yeah.
I think thankfully there's just something in my personal code that says that's the right thing. And then the environmentalism, I think I've always just had a connection to nature. I love fishing and the outdoors, and I've always been fascinated by rivers and natural systems. So it's just always resonated with me very personally to do that kind of work.
Terrific, terrific. Um, the courts and the administration together are making changes right now that make religious identity the most paramount concern in addressing the rights of individuals and organizations, resulting, in fact, in religion being a valid legal excuse to engage in other types of discrimination. What can we do to reverse this course?
It's really disturbing to see religion used as a sword in a very political and craven way, rather than religious liberty as a shield, which is how I think all of us see it. So what can we do about it? I think we've got to call it out. We've got to shame them. We've got to make sure they know that we know what they're up to. This Pompeo Commission on Unalienable Rights is just a sham. And even as loaded as it was from the start, and as much as we know what he's trying to do with it, the report was virtually useless. So I don't think they're going to get what they want. I think they're trying to drag us down the slippery slope of theocracy. But they're certainly trying, and they're going to make us be vigilant and challenge them on every front. Obviously, in the courts, where the American Humanist Association is lawyered up and always ready to be the tip of the spear. Thank you for that. And now in the Congress, a growing number of us are organized. The Congressional Free Thought Caucus has really helped with that. And so I have colleagues like Jamie Raskin and Jerry McNerney and Pramila Jayapal and others who will join me in efforts to push back from our side of the Capitol.
I'm so glad to hear that very much. I mean, the latter part. You've mentioned before that you believe even some conservative religious Americans are beginning to tire of the chaos and cruelty of the Trump administration. How could we as humanists better make space for disaffected groups in our fight against Trump's theocratic policies?
Yeah, it's really a great question. And I think the humanist community is doing a great job. I think the secular coalition continues to grow. I'm always impressed when I see it working broadly, often as an interfaith coalition. I think that's very important. I think it's less provocative. I think it's more effective. And when you can find that common cause with thoughtful people of faith, I think your work and your voice is more powerful. So I think that's a great strategy.
Good to know. Good to know. In response to Pompeo's Commission on Unalienable Rights report that was released, you and Representative Raskin, as co-chairs of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, put out a statement in which you assert This report may lend credence to a foreign policy that disregards our international human rights framework in favor of a narrower interpretation of fundamental property and majority religious rights, one that allows for increased discrimination against political dissidents, women, and minority groups. The statement concludes that the Congressional Free Thought Caucus will monitor the impact of Secretary Pompeo's commission and hold the administration accountable. What actions is the CFC hoping to take to hold Pompeo to account?
Well, we're going to keep challenging specific policy initiatives he undertakes. This is just a report, so we wanted to make sure that he knew we were watching and we knew what he's up to. But obviously, we're going to see efforts to prioritize some religions over others. I was so pleased that yesterday the House of Representatives passed the No Ban Act. So
Right.
Trying to take religion out of our immigration policy, as well as revoking and repealing and repudiating the terrible Muslim ban. It's things like that we see over and over from this administration, as well as the attack, abroad on LGBT and reproductive choice and other rights that they maybe have a harder time advancing here at home. So all of that.
Right. Often the erosion of separation of church and state starts with small incremental decisions and slow cultural shifts. But recently we've seen more overt attempts, such as the administration trying to expand school vouchers during the pandemic. Are there other areas humanists need to pay close attention to in the coming months?
Well, certainly anything and everything that Betsy DeVos is doing would be a good place to start. Sadly, it doesn't end there. You have Bill Barr, bringing a real dark and heavy religious dogma to a lot of his speeches, and sadly, I think his actions at the Department of Justice. And we've talked about Pompeo and what he's up to. I hope humanists will continue to be ready to challenge these things in court. Sometimes the Humanist Association and the Secular Coalition can go further and than what I can do as a member of Congress. So, for example, in the CARES Act, which was obviously a very important multi-trillion-dollar response to this terrible pandemic that has slammed our country and set us into an economic tailspin, we needed to get a lot of money out the door very quickly in order to prevent an awful lot of hardship. And unfortunately, we did that in some ways that has allowed taxpayer dollars to go to religious organizations. I didn't write it that way. I'm not thrilled about the way that came together, but my ability to sort of stand in the way of a multi-trillion-dollar response to a crisis is pretty limited in a moment like that. But this is where the secular community, can step in, and as necessary, even bring legal challenges if those dollars are being misspent on religious activity, as opposed to saving jobs and doing the other things that we intended.
That's helpful. What would you say to a member of Congress, or aspiring candidate even, who is contemplating making their humanist identity more known?
Well, every district, every community is a little bit different, but my sense is that a growing number of Americans are totally fine with a thoughtful, non-theistic moral framework. In fact, that's how they see the world. And so I think, the water's fine, come on in for most folks. I do have some colleagues, though, who would very much agree with you and me about religion, and they are in districts where it truly may not be a bad idea. The conventional wisdom may still apply in some of their districts, and I respect that. I think it's these are deeply personal choices that every individual will have to make. But whoever the hypothetical person you mentioned, Roy, who's thinking about it, I would say if you're in that situation and you're thinking about it, struggling with it, go for it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for your work and for your time today. Is there anything more you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, just a lot of appreciation for the American Humanist Association and all of the great secular groups that are part of the coalition that you work with. There's no way that I could have founded the Free Thought Caucus without you. And there's no way that we would be growing and engaging much more effectively with a lot of excitement about possibilities for the future if we didn't have that great inside-outside strategic relationship. So can't do it without you. Thanks for all your great advocacy and your leadership, and of course, for bringing me out of the closet as a humanist. That's awesome. I feel just better about everything. It works.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Representative Huffman, for your work and for everything you do to make humanistic change a reality.
And thanks for this great award.